What if I told you that every limitation in your life, every struggle, every failure, every fear, exists only because you've been thinking with the wrong mind? Imagine if you could think the very thoughts of divine intelligence itself. Would anything be impossible to you then? There is a deeper intelligence within you that has never been touched by fear, never been limited by failure, and never been confused by the world's noise. It is the mind of divine perfection, the same consciousness that animated Christ, the same awareness that knows no disease, no lack, and no defeat. This mind is not somewhere far above the clouds. It is the silent, radiant power already dwelling in you. The greatest tragedy of human life is that most people live their entire existence unaware of this hidden treasure within. They think with the mind of the world, a mind trained by appearances, molded by fear, and confined by logic. But once you awaken to the mind of Christ, the boundaries of the human condition begin to dissolve. The impossible becomes possible, and the unseen begins to shape the seen. This speech is not a lesson in theology, it is a revelation of power. It is an awakening to the creative spirit within you that shapes your destiny through thought. The reason you must listen to this to the end is simple. By the time you understand and begin to think from the mind of Christ, every problem in your life will meet its solution. The doors that once refused to open will yield, and the forces that seemed against you will bow to the higher order of divine thought. Keynote 1. The mind beyond the human mind. The mind of Christ is not a religious phrase, it is a state of consciousness. It is the awareness that all power, wisdom, and love flow from the infinite spirit within. Most people think with a divided mind, one part believing in God, another part doubting their own worth. This divided state creates conflict and limitation. But the mind of Christ is single. It knows no separation between the human and the divine. It perceives through unity, not through struggle. When you begin to think from this higher level, your thoughts no longer come from memory or fear. They rise from intuition, from divine intelligence. The human mind argues, worries, and resists, but the divine mind simply knows. There exists within every person a deeper intelligence, a silent mind that is not bound by the noise of daily thought or the limitations of human reasoning. It is the mind of divine awareness, the mind that knows without needing to analyze, that sees without distortion, that moves in harmony with the infinite rhythm of creation. This mind is not something to be attained from the outside or granted by any external force. It already exists within, waiting for recognition. The tragedy of human existence is that most people live entirely unaware of it, operating only through the restless surface of the human intellect, driven by fear, habit, and reaction. The divine consciousness within is like a radiant sun, hidden behind thick clouds of human thought, and as long as those clouds remain, its light cannot shine through. But the moment you still your mind and turn inward, you begin to feel a presence that is vast, peaceful, and unshakably alive. To discover this consciousness, you must first recognize that the human mind, as brilliant as it may appear, is but a fragment of something far greater. The human intellect gathers facts, reasons about appearances, and reacts to sensations, but it cannot perceive truth beyond its conditioning. It measures, compares and divides, and because it divides, it experiences separation and fear. The divine mind within you knows no separation. It perceives unity, where the human mind sees conflict, abundance where the human mind sees lack, healing where the human mind sees disease. The divine consciousness operates from the infinite field of spirit, where every idea exists in perfection. When you begin to sense this, you start to see that life itself is consciousness in motion, and that what you experience in the world is only a reflection of the level of awareness from which you are living. This inner mind is the same intelligence that holds the stars in their places, that causes the seed to unfold into the flower, that heals the wound and renews the cells of the body without your conscious effort. It is the creative life principle, eternally active, eternally whole. When you align your thought with it, you are no longer striving or struggling to make things happen. Instead, you are cooperating with the creative power that already knows how to manifest harmony and order. The mind of divine consciousness does not worry, for it knows that every outcome is governed by law, not by chance. It does not resist, for it sees that even apparent obstacles are instruments of higher purpose. When you touch that level of awareness, you begin to feel an inner certainty, a peace that passes all understanding, because you no longer rely on your limited mind to figure out life. You rely on the infinite wisdom that flows through you. To awaken this mind, one must practice the art of stillness. For as long as the surface mind is noisy, full of fear, opinions, and argument, the deeper voice of spirit cannot be heard. Silence is not emptiness, it is fullness unspoken. When you learn to quiet the chatter of the outer mind, you begin to hear the whisper of divine intuition guiding you with unfailing precision. Intuition is the language of the divine consciousness within. It does not reason or argue, it simply knows. Often it speaks in moments of calm, in the instant between two thoughts, in a sudden feeling of clarity or peace. When you follow that inner knowing, even if it defies logic, you align yourself with the divine order that orchestrates the universe. The more you turn your attention inward, the more you begin to sense that this divine mind is not separate from you. It is your very essence, your real identity, hidden beneath the layers of personality and conditioning. You are not the anxious, striving self that the world has taught you to be. You are the living expression of infinite intelligence, temporarily wearing a human form to experience creation through thought and feeling. To recognize this truth is to experience freedom, for the moment you identify yourself with the divine mind instead of the human mind. Fear loses its power over you. The worries that once seemed so real dissolve in the light of understanding. The limitations that once held you crumble, because they were only the shadows of false belief. The divine consciousness within you responds perfectly to the image you hold of yourself. If you see yourself as weak, it reflects weakness. If you see yourself as divine, it reflects strength and order. This is why the work of spiritual awakening is not about changing the external world, but about changing the image within your consciousness. As you begin to see yourself as the expression of divine intelligence, you attract into your experience the harmony that matches that awareness. It is a law of mind that the inner pattern always reproduces itself in the outer form. You cannot escape it, you can only learn to use it wisely. When you think divine thoughts, when you hold divine images, the law responds in kind, and manifests them in your reality. This inner awareness cannot be forced, but it can be invited through faith and surrender. Faith is not blind belief, it is the perception of the unseen reality before it becomes visible. It is the knowing that beyond appearances, a higher intelligence is at work. Surrender does not mean weakness. It means releasing your attachment to control, and allowing the divine order to move through you. The moment you stop struggling to make life conform to your personal will, and instead let the higher will flow, you begin to live in effortless alignment. The divine consciousness within always seeks expression, but it can only express itself through a mind that is open, receptive, and pure in intention. As you grow in awareness of this inner power, you begin to realize that every experience in your life has been leading you toward this recognition. Every challenge, every delay, every heartache has served to push you inward, away from dependence on the outer and toward reliance on the inner. The divine consciousness does not punish or withhold, it educates through experience. It teaches by reflection, showing you the contents of your own thought, until you learn to think as it thinks. When you finally recognize that all power, all wisdom, and all love are already within you, you stop seeking and start expressing. You begin to radiate the peace that cannot be disturbed, the joy that needs no reason, the confidence that does not depend on circumstances. The divine mind within you is complete, perfect, and fully active now. It is not something to be attained but something to be realized. Every time you quiet your thoughts, every time you choose love over fear, every time you affirm truth instead of doubt, you lift the veil that hides it. Little by little, the old self dissolves, and the divine self begins to shine through. You become a living channel of creative intelligence, a mirror through which the infinite sees itself. The discovery of this consciousness is the greatest transformation a human being can experience, for once you have touched it, you can never again believe yourself to be powerless. You see that the same mind that was in Christ, the same awareness that knew no limitation, is the very mind within you now, waiting for your recognition, so that it may reveal its infinite glory through the thoughts you think, the words you speak, and the life you live. Thought is the invisible architect of reality, shaping every circumstance and experience that unfolds in human life. Within the realm of divine consciousness, thought is not a mere mental activity. It is a creative force, an energy that carries the imprint of spirit and molds substance into form. Every idea, every image held in the mind, releases a vibration into the field of creation, and the universe responds in perfect correspondence. When one begins to understand the power of spiritual thought, life ceases to appear as a series of random events, and begins to reveal itself as a mirror of consciousness. The realization dawns that what you think with conviction, you become; what you hold in feeling, you attract; what you believe deeply, you manifest. The inner world of thought is the blueprint of the outer world of form. And to change the form, one must first alter the pattern of thought that created it. The mind of divine intelligence thinks in terms of wholeness, not fragmentation. Its thoughts are not burdened by fear, doubt, or contradiction. When you align with that level of awareness, your thoughts become channels through which the creative power of spirit flows unobstructed. You are no longer merely thinking personal thoughts. You are allowing the thoughts of divine intelligence to move through you. These thoughts carry authority, because they are rooted in truth. They are not bound by appearances. They see beyond limitation to the eternal possibility within all things. The human mind sees obstacles. The divine mind sees order. The human mind worries about provision. The divine mind knows that infinite supply is already present. When you allow divine thought to dominate, you cease to struggle and begin to create from peace. The greatest misunderstanding of thought is that it is private or insignificant. In reality, no thought is without consequence. Every thought sends a signal into the unseen realm and sets into motion forces that will, in time, return as experience. This is the law of mental correspondence. The outer condition always mirrors the inner belief. To think spiritually is to think in harmony with divine law. It is to hold ideas that are true, pure, and constructive. When you think with love, peace, and gratitude, you are vibrating in alignment with the creative current of life itself. Such thoughts are magnetic to all that is good, because they are of the same nature as the divine source. Conversely, when you think thoughts of fear, resentment, or criticism, you separate yourself mentally from the flow of divine order, and the outer world reflects that separation as conflict, delay, or lack. Spiritual thought carries within it the substance of faith. Faith is not wishful thinking. It is the quiet assurance that what is thought in the divine mind is already true in the invisible realm. When you think from that level, you are not trying to make something happen. You are acknowledging that it already is. This recognition changes everything, for creation begins not with effort but with knowing. Every miracle ever witnessed, every transformation ever experienced, was born from someone thinking from the level of divine knowing, rather than human hoping. The moment you think a thought from divine consciousness, you send forth a command that the universe must obey, because divine thought operates through law, not chance. There is a sacred discipline in training the mind to think spiritually. It begins with awareness, becoming conscious of what you are habitually thinking. The average mind drifts, repeating the same patterns of worry, judgment, and doubt that create the very experiences it fears. To think spiritually means to replace these patterns deliberately with the higher patterns of truth. It means to fill the mind with images of health, abundance, and peace, even when appearances suggest otherwise. Every time you choose a divine thought over a fearful one, you strengthen a new mental pathway that aligns your consciousness with infinite power. Over time, these higher patterns become automatic, and your outer world begins to mirror that transformation. Spiritual thought is never forced, it flows from inner alignment. It is not positive thinking in the superficial sense. It is truth thinking. It is not an attempt to deny reality, but a deeper recognition that what is real in spirit must eventually appear in form. When Christ spoke to the storm and said, "Peace, be still," he was not trying to calm the sea through effort. He was thinking from the divine consciousness, where only peace exists. His thought carried authority, because it originated from truth. The same authority is available to you, when your thought is rooted in divine awareness. Every condition responds to the vibration of consciousness that created it. And when divine thought is introduced, discord dissolves because it cannot exist in the presence of perfect order. The power of spiritual thought is amplified by feeling. Thought alone can create form, but thought imbued with emotion becomes magnetic. When your heart and mind are united in belief, you set in motion the highest creative potential. This is why faith is always accompanied by feeling. It is the warmth of conviction, the certainty that the unseen good is already yours. To think spiritually is to feel the reality of your desire as already fulfilled, to live mentally in the end, rather than in the struggle of the process. This alignment of thought and feeling generates a magnetic field that draws to you people, opportunities, and circumstances that match your inner state. The divine mind does not strain to attract, it simply radiates, and what is of like vibration naturally gravitates toward it. You are not a powerless observer in a chaotic universe, you are a conscious co-creator with divine intelligence. Every time you hold a thought of truth, you participate in the creative process of the universe. The same power that forms galaxies responds to the pattern of your belief. To think from the divine mind is to think with infinite intelligence itself, and such thought cannot fail to produce results in harmony with divine law. The key is consistency. Occasional moments of faith are not enough. You must sustain the vibration of truth until it becomes the natural tone of your consciousness. As you do, you begin to notice that outer changes occur effortlessly, almost as if life itself is cooperating with you. To cultivate spiritual thought, begin each day by aligning your mind with the highest truth you can conceive. Affirm that divine wisdom guides every decision, that divine love governs every relationship, that divine abundance flows through every aspect of your life. As you repeat these truths, you impress them upon the subconscious, and the subconscious, being creative, expresses them in your experience. You begin to think as divine intelligence thinks. Without fear, without doubt, without opposition. The mind becomes a clear channel through which inspiration flows freely. Ideas come with clarity, decisions unfold with ease, and life arranges itself according to the pattern of harmony that exists within. The more you live in this awareness, the more you realize that thought is not bound by time or space. A divine thought held with conviction can reach across any distance, heal any situation, and transform any circumstance. The energy of consciousness is limitless, and you are its vessel. Every prayer, every affirmation, every silent realization of truth releases this energy into the field of creation. You do not have to know how it will manifest, you need only to know that it must, because divine law is unfailing. The results may come through channels you never imagined, but they will come, because the universe always responds to the vibration of divine thought. As you continue to practice this, your mind becomes anchored in peace. You stop reacting to appearances, because you understand that appearances are temporary reflections of thought. You no longer fear the outer world because you know that your power lies within. You think only from the level of divine order, and as a result, everything around you begins to reflect that order. You move through life with calm confidence, speaking words of power, radiating the vibration of truth, and silently creating the conditions that express the perfection of divine intelligence through the instrument of your thought. The renewal of the inner mind is the process through which a person rises from the limited patterns of human thinking into the expansive awareness of divine consciousness. It is not a single moment of enlightenment, but a continual unfolding, a daily purification of thought, emotion, and belief. Every thought you entertain leaves an impression upon the subconscious, and over time those impressions crystallize into habits, attitudes, and circumstances. Most people live under the weight of inherited ideas, cultural conditioning, and memories of pain, never realizing that they are free to think anew. The renewal of the mind begins the moment you recognize that your current reality is only a reflection of past thinking, not an unchangeable destiny. The inner world is a creative workshop, and renewal is the art of reshaping that workshop to align with divine truth. The human mind operates largely on repetition. It replays the same thoughts day after day, producing the same emotional responses and experiences. These repeated patterns form what can be called mental grooves. And as long as you continue to think along those grooves, life appears unchanging. To renew the mind is to lift thought out of those grooves and direct it toward higher patterns. This requires conscious effort at first, because the old thoughts will resist being replaced. The subconscious, though impersonal, clings to what is familiar, yet the moment you persistently introduce new life, giving ideas into your awareness, the old patterns begin to weaken. Every positive affirmation, every moment of gratitude, every silent acknowledgement of truth, is a stroke of renewal that reshapes the inner landscape. The renewal of the mind is a spiritual cleansing. Just as stagnant water becomes fresh when a new current flows through it, the mind becomes renewed when divine ideas flow freely. The thoughts of fear, guilt, and unworthiness that have occupied your consciousness for years begin to dissolve in the light of higher awareness. This is not about suppressing negative thoughts, but transforming them. Every time you confront a fearful idea with faith, you redeem that thought and raise its vibration. Every time you meet resentment with forgiveness, you purify a portion of the mind. Renewal is the conscious substitution of truth for error, love for fear, peace for conflict. The more you practice this, the more your mind becomes a temple of divine order. Renewal begins with awareness, because you cannot change what you do not recognize. When you observe your thoughts without judgment, you begin to see how much of your mental activity is reactive and automatic. You may notice the same inner dialogue repeating endlessly, the same worries circling without resolution. Awareness interrupts this cycle by shining the light of consciousness upon it. The moment you become aware of a limiting thought, you have already begun to transform it. The simple act of observation lifts you above identification. You realize that you are not the thought, but the awareness behind it, and in that recognition lies freedom. From that point forward, you can choose what to think instead of being driven by what you think. Renewal also requires intention. The mind must be directed toward a definite purpose, for an unfocused mind is easily drawn back into the old patterns. Choose the qualities you wish to embody: peace, wisdom, love, abundance, and hold them before your mental vision until they become familiar. Speak them silently throughout the day as affirmations of truth. When you affirm, "The wisdom of the divine guides me," you are not creating that wisdom, but aligning your thought with it. The repetition of truth imprints it upon the subconscious, and the subconscious then expresses it automatically in your behavior and environment. What begins as a deliberate practice becomes a natural state of consciousness. The renewal of the inner mind is not achieved by force, but by cooperation with divine law. You cannot push your way into peace, you must relax into it. The divine mind works through stillness, not struggle. When you quiet the surface agitation of thought, the deeper wisdom begins to rise. Meditation, prayer, or even moments of silent reflection open the channel through which renewal flows. In stillness, you feel the presence of divine intelligence moving through you, reorganizing your thoughts, releasing old burdens, and filling you with new understanding. Often, after a period of quiet, an idea will come that changes everything, a simple insight that dissolves confusion and restores order. These moments are evidence of renewal taking place at the level of consciousness. The mind renews itself through truth, and truth is revealed through attention to the divine. Whatever you consistently contemplate, you become. If you dwell on failure, you strengthen failure. If you dwell on divine perfection, you draw that perfection into manifestation. This is why the ancient wisdom teaches to set your mind on things above, not on the shifting appearances of the world. When your inner attention is fixed on the eternal, the temporary conditions of life lose their power to disturb you. The renewed mind sees through appearances and recognizes the divine idea behind every situation. Even challenges are seen as opportunities for expansion, not as obstacles. This shift in perception is the hallmark of renewal. Renewal also affects the body, for the body is a mirror of the mind. Every cell responds to the vibration of thought. When the mind is filled with fear or resentment, the body contracts and becomes tense. When the mind is filled with peace and joy, the body relaxes and heals. Many of the conditions called disease are simply the outer effects of mental disturbance. As the mind renews itself in harmony with divine order, the body follows naturally. The energy that once sustained anxiety is redirected into vitality and health. The subconscious, guided by divine intelligence, begins to restore balance to every function. This is not imagination but the natural law of mind and body working together in unity. The renewal of the mind also extends to relationships and circumstances. When you think differently, you respond differently, and the world responds to you accordingly. People who once seemed hostile may become cooperative, because your vibration has changed. Opportunities that were invisible before begin to appear, not because they were created suddenly, but because your renewed awareness can now perceive them. Life itself seems to rearrange around your new state of consciousness. This is the divine order reflecting itself in form. The outer change is always the shadow of the inner transformation. To live in continual renewal, one must cultivate spiritual vigilance. The old patterns of thought do not vanish overnight. They attempt to reassert themselves through habit. But every moment presents a choice. You can choose to think from the old self or the renewed self. Each choice strengthens one and weakens the other. Persistence is the key. Every time you turn from fear to faith, from judgment to understanding, from doubt to trust, you are building the new mind. Gradually, the old identity dissolves, and the consciousness of divine wholeness takes its place. You begin to live from inspiration rather than reaction, from peace rather than struggle, from love rather than fear. The renewed mind becomes a vessel of divine power, not because it seeks power, but because it is aligned with truth. It no longer strives to control life but allows life to flow through it. Ideas come effortlessly, solutions arise naturally, and the path ahead unfolds without confusion. The inner renewal has made the mind transparent to divine intelligence, and through that transparency, the infinite expresses itself in form. You find yourself thinking thoughts that uplift, speaking words that heal, and acting with clarity that feels guided rather than planned. Renewal is not an escape from the world, but a transformation of how you see and move within it. Each moment becomes a new creation, each breath a silent prayer of gratitude for the divine life expressing itself through the mind made new. Living from oneness is the realization that there is no separation between you and the divine, no gap between the creator and creation, no distance between spirit and form. It is the state of consciousness in which you move, think, and act as an expression of divine intelligence, rather than as an isolated individual struggling against the world. In this awareness, life becomes effortless because you are no longer trying to make things happen by the force of personal will. You are allowing the infinite to express itself through you. The world that once seemed full of conflict and division begins to reveal its underlying harmony. You no longer see yourself as a fragment among fragments, but as the whole expressing itself in infinite variety. The veil of separation lifts, and you realize that the same life that beats your heart flows through every living being, that the same light that shines in the stars burns quietly within your own soul. To live from oneness, you must first recognize the illusion of separation that dominates human thought. From birth, the mind is trained to perceive difference, to label, compare, and divide. It learns to identify itself with the body, the name, the personality, the history, and the collection of memories that make up the human identity. But none of these define what you truly are. They are temporary garments worn by the eternal self. The sense of being a separate self is the root of fear, because separation breeds vulnerability. When you see yourself as apart from the whole, you feel threatened by forces outside your control. But when you awaken to oneness, fear dissolves, for there is no other to fear. You are one with the power that governs the universe, and that power moves through you as naturally as breath. Living from oneness means seeing God not as a distant ruler, but as the life within you. It is realizing that the divine is not something to reach but something to reveal. You reveal it each time you think with love instead of judgment, each time you forgive instead of resent, each time you choose peace instead of conflict. The divine does not dwell in a faraway heaven, but in the silent core of your being. When you turn your awareness inward and rest in that stillness, you touch the eternal presence that has always been there. That presence does not speak in words, yet it communicates through intuition, through quiet assurance, through the sense of rightness that arises when you are aligned with truth. As you begin to live from this awareness, your perception of the world changes. You stop seeing people as separate personalities, and start seeing them as expressions of the same divine life. Every encounter becomes sacred, because you recognize yourself in the other. Even those who challenge or offend you are mirrors, showing parts of your own consciousness seeking integration. This understanding dissolves judgment and replaces it with compassion. You realize that love is not an emotion but a state of recognition. The recognition of unity beneath the forms of difference. When you love from oneness, you are not giving something away, you are acknowledging what already is. Love becomes the natural expression of your being, flowing without effort or expectation. Living from oneness also transforms how you act in the world. You no longer act from fear of loss or desire for gain, you act from inspiration. The actions that flow from this state are harmonious, effective, and guided by divine intelligence. They do not arise from calculation, but from inner knowing. You may find yourself in the right place at the right time, speaking the right words without premeditation, accomplishing without strain what once seemed difficult. This is the effortless rhythm of divine action. The mind that lives in oneness does not force outcomes, but trusts the unfolding of life. It knows that every step is guided, every need supplied, every moment perfect in its purpose. In the awareness of oneness, you also come to understand the law of giving and receiving as one continuous movement. There is no giver and receiver as separate entities. There is only the circulation of divine energy expressing itself in form. When you give from this consciousness, you never feel depleted, because you are giving from an infinite source. When you receive, you do not feel indebted, because you recognize that it is the same life giving to itself through different channels. This realization brings abundance, for lack exists only in separation. In unity, a supply flows without obstruction, just as a river flows when it is not dammed by fear or attachment. The mind that lives in separation believes that life is a competition for limited resources. The mind that lives in oneness knows that life is cooperation with an infinite abundance. You begin to see that what benefits one benefits all, and what harms one harms all. From this understanding arises a natural desire to bless, to uplift, to serve. Service becomes joy, not obligation, because you are serving yourself in another form. When you lift others, you lift the whole, and because you are part of that whole, you are lifted too. This is the divine economy of oneness, where love multiplies itself through giving, and peace expands through every act of understanding. Living from oneness brings a deep sense of peace that is independent of circumstances. You no longer depend on external conditions for happiness, because you have found the source within. This peace is not passive. It is vibrant and alive, like the stillness at the center of a turning wheel. It allows you to face challenges without fear, to move through change without losing balance, to remain centered even in the midst of chaos. You realize that nothing outside you has power over the state of your consciousness, for consciousness itself is the source of power. This realization frees you from the emotional turbulence that once ruled your life. You respond to life rather than react to it, guided always by the quiet wisdom of the inner presence. Living from oneness is not withdrawal from the world, but deeper participation in it. You engage fully in life's experiences but without attachment. You enjoy beauty without clinging, meet loss without despair, work with passion without exhaustion. You see every circumstance as an expression of the one life, playing through different forms. Even pain is understood as part of the unfolding, a signal guiding you toward greater alignment. Nothing is wasted, for everything serves the evolution of consciousness. The events of life, pleasant or painful, become opportunities to express divine qualities, patience, compassion, strength, faith. As the sense of separation fades, so too does the burden of personal striving. You no longer feel the need to prove yourself, defend yourself, or compare yourself to others. The ego, which thrives on comparison, loses its grip, and in its place arises a quiet humility, born of understanding your true nature. You see that all greatness belongs to the divine, and because you are one with it, that greatness expresses through you naturally. You stop chasing power, and instead become a conduit for it. You stop seeking recognition because you realize that nothing can add to, or take away from what you already are. Living from oneness also awakens a profound sense of gratitude. Gratitude becomes not a reaction to specific blessings, but a continuous awareness of the miracle of being. You give thanks not only when things go well but in every moment, because every moment is a revelation of divine life. Gratitude opens the heart even wider, allowing more of the divine current to flow through. It dissolves resistance and anchors you in the present, where the fullness of life is always found. From this state of gratitude, creativity flourishes effortlessly. Ideas arise with clarity, relationships deepen, and synchronicities multiply, for the universe mirrors the harmony of your consciousness. In oneness, even the concept of death loses its sting, because you understand that life cannot be divided or destroyed. The forms change, but the essence remains eternal. You see continuity where others see ending, and this knowledge fills you with serenity. Fear fades, because you know that the self which lives in oneness is beyond birth and death, untouched by time. This understanding brings not detachment from life, but a deeper love for it, a reverence for every expression of being as sacred. Living from oneness is the fulfillment of the spiritual journey, the realization that there was never anywhere to go or anything to become. The divine has always been here, as the life within you, as the intelligence behind every thought, as the love that connects all things. To live from that awareness is to live in truth, to think with clarity, to act with compassion, and to move through the world as a transparent instrument of divine light, expressing itself through form.